Welcome to HR Voices, a podcast where people leaders share their side of the story. We talk about the challenges they're facing, how they're addressing them, and what changes they hope to see as the workplace evolves. This podcast is sponsored by All Voices, the all-in-one employee relations platform. Hello, welcome to HR Voices. I'm your host, Rebecca Taylor, and I'm here with Clark Jessop, the SVP of HR at US Bank. Welcome, Clark. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Rebecca. Appreciate the opportunity. I have listened to a few of the episodes since you took over hosting. I was a broadcast journalism major and spent a couple of years in radio. And so as I listen, I think particularly with podcasts, you see the full spectrum, but you're doing a great job.
Thank you. Thank you. So you're a real pro too. You know probably way more about the best practices than I do.
It's been a long time, but I used to.
Very cool. So I'd love if we could start with, if you could tell us a little bit about you. I know, especially knowing your background, that's kind of a fun little segue into HR too. So can you tell us about your role, about US Bank and, what you're working on right now?
Yeah, absolutely. So originally from Denver, I've been in the Dallas area for several years now. Earlier in my career, I spent several years with large tech companies, HP and then Cognizant, which exposed me to fast-moving product environments and digital operating models. Then about 5 years ago, I transitioned to US Bank, and I've had a great 5 years here. So the bank, most people have some familiarity, but we're a large national bank known for having a strong customer focus and steady growth. One of the things that I've really appreciated since coming here, though, is the balance between innovation. I think some people still perceive banks as being old and stodgy, but there's actually a ton of innovation in banking right now, but particularly here, balancing that with good risk practices and responsibility, which obviously matters a lot in financial services. So today I am the HR lead for our digital data and AI teams, along with the product teams across the company. So I get to see that full life cycle, starting where the customer needs are defined in product to then how those needs get built and delivered in digital data and AI, which is a really cool area to support from a people perspective.
Yeah, I was going to say that's kind of the place to be right now, I think, especially when you're looking at banks where I think when I think of banks, I do think old school, but I also just think regulation, right? I think that there's a lot of safety nets and a lot of sort of guards that you have to kind of stay within for good reason, right? I mean, it's very important information that you're all kind of working with. So in the scope of that, kind of working on those different teams, like what are some of the challenges that kind of come with that?
Yeah, I would describe it as managing acceleration without losing clarity, because you see AI dramatically increasing speed at the task level, things like drafting and analyzing and synthesizing lots of different sources of data. And that is a game changer, but it doesn't automatically equal better decisions. One of the things that I have observed with my leaders is that they are navigating constant inputs in a bank that is customer data and regulatory updates, various stakeholder requests. We've got performance dashboards for about everything now. Our chief digital officer, who I support, Dominic Ventura, he recently said that the biggest risk in the AI age is probably data overload, which really struck me because AI increases output and the speed of that output. For example, I think every meeting I come out of, someone sends the AI generated notes, which are thorough, but they're long, and AI can analyze, but sometimes overanalyze, which can be helpful. But if we're not really intentional, it can just increase the noise. So you could kind of think of it like someone in a control tower at a busy airport where you constantly have signals coming in. You have weather updates and fuel levels and runway availability and maintenance alert, all of these things. And some of those signals require immediate experienced human judgment. Like if you have a sudden weather shift or you've got two aircraft that are approaching the same runway, but a lot of it should flow automatically, because if you treat every signal as equally urgent, you can overwhelm the system. On the other hand, if you automate everything, you introduce risk. And so it's finding that balance. So I think the real skill, especially in the AI age, is deciding which signals deserve deep human focus and then designing the workflow to make sure that those moments are protected. So for
Yeah.
my role, that means helping clarify who actually makes decisions, simplifying structures where we can, and making sure that the right expertise is positioned where it matters most. And so, especially now, I'm trying to not add more process. It's to help reduce friction so leaders can focus on what really drives value.
Yeah. I love that because it's kind of like you want to be able to make sure that you're adding process so that you're being thoughtful about what is actually kind of becoming part of action or implementing something. But it's kind of like there's data for data's sake, there's process for process sake, and too much of
Yeah,
all of those things is just going to muddy the water even more. Something you said is
right.
that, I talk with a lot of folks about sort of AI and how it's changing our different skill sets and what's going to be required for us to be able to do jobs and roles. And there's always sort of the comment that human skills are going to be the things that kind of make someone really, really great at using AI or not. But I think this is one of the first time that someone's actually mentioned what skill that could be, or just named one of those skills because you said discernment.
Mm.
And for folks who are listening to this is sort of always the conversation that we try to have is like when we say human skills, like what are some of the human skills besides just AI fluency? So how are you and your team using discernment when you're kind of thinking about the inputs that go into the different tools as much as you can talk about, right?
Yeah, it's a great question. It kind of reminds me of I remember in when I was in business school, as an example, they showed one of the new remote controls that had come out for a TV, and it had like a zillion buttons and that whole features versus benefits discussion. So
Yeah.
I think discernment, you need to focus on what is driving actual business outcomes. And I feel like right now we're moving away from this phase, but we're still in that phase of introducing features without having clear benefits. And so I think the next phase of work is going to be identifying where that discernment comes in. And it's hard to say, like, answer that question at a macro level, because I think it happens at a micro level with people who are actually applying the technology within their individual jobs.
Yeah. I think you did answer it at a macro level, though, is just focusing on the business outcome or the business impact as your sort of North Star. And that's
Yeah,
going to show up in different, workflows you're trying to build or different tools you're trying to use. But that as your sort of, let's look at all the things that we're doing, hold it up against this. Remember that this is what we're trying to achieve. And if we're not on that path, then maybe something that we're doing needs to change, right?
right, right, exactly.
Very cool. Thank you. What kind of, when you're thinking about the different things that are on the radar for 2026, what kinds of projects are you focusing on or what kinds of things are you excited about?
I think just further to that last point, it's really making sure that, particularly for a supporting function or an enabling function like HR, that we remember why we exist in a large company. And so focusing both my teams and my leaders on being outcome driven versus being process driven or calendar driven. And I think I'm especially sensitive to that because I grew up watching my parents run a small furniture store, where in that world, the link between your work and whether the company succeeds, it's very direct. Everyone knew their role. They knew how it contributed to the success of the survival of the organization. So are sales happening? Is furniture being delivered, et cetera? You feel that immediately. So growing up with that, the first time that I worked inside of a large company, I remember being shocked by how many people spent time formatting PowerPoint decks. And I had this moment of thinking, this feels just very different from the value creation that I saw growing up. And so large companies in particular need structure and coordination, and recognizing that you're in a function that isn't direct revenue generating like HR. It's especially critical not to lose sight of the fact that we are here to enable business outcomes. And so I think given the time that we're in, as far as what we're focusing on this year, it's going beyond driving programs. It's asking questions like, are we helping the business move faster? Are we adding noise or are we reducing noise? Are we increasing clarity? Are we aligning talent and structure with value is actually created? And so again, easy to become calendar driven. It's harder, but really important to stay outcome driven. And I think given the shifting landscape of what our businesses are needing to operate within. We need to make sure within HR that we're not putting the brakes on that, going back and saying, no, we've got to run these HR processes that we've created for HR. No, HR is there to enable the business, and we need to make sure that the priorities that we set are aligned to that.
Yeah, it's so true. I think there's like this there's, the narrative of HR of AI is going to take our jobs is something we've all heard, right? Whether, there's so many different thoughts, opinions, around it. Uh, but when I kind of talk to folks that are very focused on having calendar meetings, building process, like kind of just finding those points to kind of insert themselves in that, I see that as almost a fear response, as a way to kind of say, look at me, I'm important, I'm here. And what you're saying, which I think is really, really important for people to hear, is you still need to make sure that you are adding value, that, there is so much value that we all bring, but that might not be the place that it's introduced because it's, adding friction for friction's sake or adding process for process sake isn't necessarily the way that you're going to impact those business outcomes. And it's almost like this is kind of how I'm hearing it is you have to kind of take a step back and see, okay, let's level up our thought process a little bit more. Not
Exactly.
what are we trying to do? What are we trying to achieve? And when you understand what you're trying to achieve, it might change what you're going to do because the path there is going to be different.
Yeah, you brought up that example. Early in career, I remember it was one of the regular HR processes that we always run, performance management and compensation. It wasn't at my current company, but we got through that. And if you asked HR, everyone was giving themselves pats on the back and saying, we hit all of our deadlines, we met all of our deliverables. And, but if you ask the business, they would tell you it was a very painful process. And so we just need to be really careful to always remember that what our role is.
Yeah. And I think it's okay to be nervous about that shift, but I think that's kind of what we're at sort of that phase where we're not quite sure what the new way is yet. We know that the old way isn't the way anymore and that this sort of transitional phase can be really intimidating for people, right? And so, hearing advice from leaders like you and hearing HR leaders kind of just sort of embrace that and just say, that's okay. We don't have to know all of the answers.
Right.
This is kind of the point, right? This is what the work is. I just think that's always really cool and just really refreshing to hear because it can feel really intimidating, feeling like you have to get it all right. There's a lot of pressure to do that too.
Yeah.
But I think that
Yeah.
we're in a phase of a little bit more nuance.
Yep. I totally agree. I think one of the ways that leaning in more now than ever is this concept of co-creation to make sure that what you're doing is relevant and aligned with the business. And this is a huge focus from our head of HR. It's a huge focus from the chief digital officer that I support. And so if you are enabling a digital strategy, you sit with digital leaders and design that together. If you're supporting a revenue strategy, you build alongside the business, not in isolation. And that applies in HR and digital and product. Anywhere where you are supporting a larger strategy, you don't want to be the one building programs in a dark corner of whatever your function is. You want to make sure that that you're doing that with the people who are ultimately going to benefit from it. If you ask, can I go and create this program, and the leader says, knock yourself out, that's not a good sign. They should say, yes, I want that. I need that.
Yeah.
And when you do that, there's a couple of benefits that I've seen. I mean, first, the solution, it's better because it isn't just pie in the sky HR thinking. It reflects real constraints. And then second, adoption is stronger because people have skin in the game. They have ownership. So it can be slower up front sometimes, but it's faster in execution.
Yeah. Isn't there a saying it's just like slow is, not slow is fast, slow is
Yeah.
smooth? It's like the
Yeah.
slower,
Yeah.
yeah, like you have to go slow to go fast too. That was another one. I think it's maybe the similar type of saying. But it
Yep.
is true. And
Yeah.
I love your advice too
Absolutely.
to talk to digital leaders. If you're trying to build digital programs, don't build it in isolation because you don't have to be an expert in everything, but you do have to be collaborative and curious. I think there's a level of vulnerability that it takes, though, to be able to go to your coworkers and say, maybe people who are in position of power over you, and say, I don't actually know how to do this. Can you help me? And I've heard from so many more leaders like yourself that are trying to really normalize those types of conversations, because when you ask someone for help on something that is meant to benefit them too, they're likely to offer it, or they're likely to give
Right.
it, right? It's so
Yeah.
cool.
I talk to a lot of people in college and about to graduate college, and particularly the ones that are high achievers and smart and anxious to make a contribution. I know I fell into this trap that we're talking about a lot early in my career, where it was like, I want to put an atom bomb on an anthill and really go out and just like, create all the slides and all the process documents and impress people. Again, going back to just that signal overload, that input overload, if you're talking to an executive leader and you just kind of brain dump everything on them, what they're really looking for is simplicity and a path to value within their organization.
Well, Clark, I know we're just at time, and I have so many more questions too about some of the stuff that you're doing, that I'd love to kind of just sort of keep in touch with you and see what we could kind of keep learning more. But do you have any closing thoughts for anyone who's listening to this?
Yeah, just that I think from a world of work standpoint, fortune usually favors people who are open and optimistic versus people who are cynical and resistant. So I think for companies, the initial push again has been on adopting tools, but we're at a stage now where it's much more than that. Within HR, it's being intentional about how work is designed, clarifying where human judgment is needed, simplifying decision flows. And then on a personal level, I have two college age sons, and we talk about this all the time because there's a belief that it's recent college grads who will really take the brunt of the early impact of AI and work that AI takes over that has in the past been done by humans. But my advice to them is to not look at this defensively, but to play a part in defining what work looks like in the AI era. And I actually recently called my son. I said, I am buying you a premium AI subscription, fraction of what we pay for tuition, but not because he needs it for class, but just because I want him experimenting and building fluency and just staying close to how this technology is evolving, because the people who lean in and learn how to work with AI in a thoughtful and intentional way are going to have a real advantage. And it provides an opportunity for people who are willing to design and adapt no matter what career level you are. So that's really exciting.
Yeah, that's really cool. I think it's a really cool gift too, just because it's like the tools are here. And if you enter the workforce not able to use them, it's almost like not knowing how to type anymore, right? It's like
Yeah.
they're going to become such core basic things.
Or if you're using it as a search engine, or it's so much deeper than that. So I said, I'm buying this for you, but I want you to use it a lot,
Yeah.
and be creative and think about how do you create with it.
Yeah. Very cool. Good advice. And I think it's good advice for anybody listening to this too. It's like it's sort of relevant across the board. And that's why I think it's such a really good take. So thank you, Clark. Thank you for being
Thank you.
here. And thank you, everybody, for listening. And I hope everybody has a good rest of your day. Thank you.